Hello, I'm Hannah Ash, and welcome to the Hanley podcast featuring women who've made creative career change. Today, I'm talking to Maria Hanley, a teacher who, through an unplanned pandemic-induced transition, her words, now is very much a writer. Welcome, Maria, to Hanley and the Inspiring Creative Career Change podcast. Please, could you begin by introducing yourself?
Good morning, Hannah. I am speaking to you from Santa Barbara, California this morning, and I am really excited to be here. We've chatted over Substack, and it's neat to be having a live conversation with you. And I just want to make a note for listeners that Maria Hanley is my maiden name, and that's the name I publish under, just for purposes of clarity.
Great. Well, let's start by you telling us about your original career and how you found yourself there.
Sure. So my professional background is in education, and I decided to go into teaching my senior year in college. I wasn't an education major, but I had some space in my schedule to take some electives, and I ended up taking an early childhood ed class, which I really enjoyed. And I think up until that point, although I had really enjoyed my major, which was international relations, I just didn't have a solid plan of what I was going to do post-graduation. And when I took this class, it felt like a moment of clarity. Right. And I thought, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to teach. And from there, I decided to get a master's in elementary education. And after that, I went into my first teaching job, and I taught for about 5 years, various grade levels, before I got married and started a family, at which point I ended up staying home with my children for about a decade, and then returned to teaching shortly before the pandemic.
Yeah, okay. And at what point did you realize it was time for a change, or did that just kind of happen?
Yeah, it didn't just happen. It was, the timing of it was definitely influenced by the pandemic. The best way I've come to describe it is that it was an unplanned pandemic-induced transition for me. And I do wonder that if that hadn't happened, maybe I would still be teaching. It's quite possible. But where I was before 2020 was that I had, as I mentioned, been home for about a decade, focusing on raising my boys. And I was very set on returning to my teaching career at some point. And I had hit a point where we had moved, and I had reinvested in my teaching career, and that I had to go back to school to update my certification. And I really put a lot of time and energy and focus into it. It was important to me. And I had been working for about 3 years back in schools when the pandemic, we all know what happened in March 2020, and then everything shut down. And so I felt like I had been on a path back to where I wanted to be at that point. I thought, okay, I'm on track. I'm going to get back into teaching. I'll create a balance, between my career and my family. And it was in my mind, exactly as I had planned. But then things changed and the world shut down, and sort of overnight, everyone has their own version of what happened, but I had 3 children at home overnight, and trying to help them with their school, and then also having to help my own students online to finish out that school year. And everything, as we know, just changed very quickly, including the opportunity, the job that I had, because the schools had to make so many decisions very quickly and reorganize and shift. The opportunity that I had changed. And I had to reevaluate how I was going to navigate the new reality. And And I made the decision to just pull back from teaching at that point
Yeah.
because I needed to focus on what was happening in my household.
Sure.
And at the same time, though, I want to say maybe late 2019, I had also started to perhaps wonder, just, I didn't even talk about it to anyone else, but just maybe wonder if there was something else, maybe something else I could do, something else. Uh, I didn't necessarily think it was going to be something separate from teaching, but I just, the question marks started to pop up.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had started to think about maybe a children's book. And I think probably that was influenced through my work in schools. I read a lot of children's literature. I worked with children every day. And so I thought, oh yes, that's a perfect overlap. And that's what I had in my mind at that point. And when I started to think about that, I also realized that I really had no idea how to start that. How does one do that? And I thought, I'd like to take a writing class. Let's just give it a shot. And so I found a very beginner level, low stakes, low pressure, self-paced course online. And I just started working on that. So that was late 2019. And it was just, very relaxed, and I would work on it in the evenings, and I really enjoyed it. And so when the pandemic hit, I was still doing that. But what happened was when I pulled back from teaching, all this space and time opened up, and I started to really focus on that. And what happened was I finished one course and I thought, oh, I just want to keep going. And I just kept building from there. And so I think that again, it wasn't really a one solid moment when I thought, oh, I'm done here, I need to move on. It evolved.
Yeah, a series of events that kind of led to it and helped you to find yourself in that position.
Yes, absolutely.
And at what point did you realize that you had become a writer?
Well, I think I have to remind myself every day. Because I think a lot of it is giving yourself permission.
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of own that new identity. And I think that there was a point when I think at the beginning, I thought of it very much as a hobby because I was still holding on to that. Okay, well, things are a bit funny right now. We're all in lockdown, we're all home, but when things go back to normal, I'll just try to pick up where I left off and everything will come back together. And I'll still work on this, but for now, this is, getting me through this time. And and the writing classes was a bright spot for me during a very dark time, what felt like a dark time for a lot of us. But I think when we started to come out of it and the world, started to return to perhaps a new normal.
Yeah.
I think I realized I was so far into it that it didn't feel like a hobby anymore. And I didn't want it to be a hobby anymore.
Yeah.
I was having, a lot of fun, but I just felt so engaged. And I felt like it was sort of like that moment when I realized I wanted to teach. It was a new clarity, a moment of, oh, this is what I want to do. This isn't what I just want to do as a hobby. I want to do this with my life. Like I want to do this as a job.
Yeah.
And as I said, I do have to work on every day, just giving myself permission, but it's gotten a lot easier.
Yeah.
And well, the thing is, no one is going to hand it to you. You have to kind of just grab it and say, I'm doing this. And if I don't take myself seriously, how can I expect anyone else to?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think the more I gave myself permission, the more it just gets, it gets easier every day.
Yeah. And I guess you invested in yourself and invested in studying, taking those courses during the pandemic. So you'd invested time and money and just your energy in the writing courses. So I suppose that maybe helped you to kind of feel the way you did a little bit. Validation, perhaps.
I think that's absolutely right. And I just knowing myself, I do better with structure and guidance and
Yeah.
accountability. And I do really value going to the experts and relying on people who have gone before and learning from them, because I mean, this is a midlife switch for me. So
Yeah.
part of it is just timing and efficiency. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I want
Yeah.
to learn
Yeah.
from the people who know what they're doing. So there's that piece of it. But yes, you're absolutely right. Once you start to invest your, of course, money, but your time and your energy into something, it means something. And
Yes.
and I suppose too, maybe, not just with writing, I guess that any, sort of creative venture has some equivalent, but I suppose the first acceptance I got when I had a short story or an essay published, when those things started to happen, it did start to feel definitely a little more real. Like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, someone else out there
Yeah.
thinks that has deemed my writing good enough to go into their publication.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a huge validation. And of course you can't rely on it, but
No.
it's
It
wonderful
must
when it
be a
happens.
great feeling. Yeah, exactly. That again, it's another level of validation of what you're doing, isn't it? That you feel it's somebody else is viewing it in a way that is really positive, and they want you to write, and so you want to do more of it.
Yeah.
What have been some of the benefits of your switch to becoming a writer so far for you?
Well, I mean, number one, I think the first one, and it's obvious, is that I don't have to, my timing is flexible. I only have to report to myself right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that's pretty easy and clear. But I think that it is it is a real thing as a working parent, and it doesn't really matter what you're doing. But I think anyone who is trying to juggle those two things has always had that moment of, you're just pulled all the time. And the moments that come to mind when you ask that are always, it didn't happen very often, but there would always be a time or several of them when you'd get a call or, and it could either be the office of your children, of my son's school, or my husband texted me saying, can you get him? Or
yeah,
what are you doing right now? I have a meeting, and, because someone's sick or someone
yeah,
needs to leave early or whatever it is. And, you make it happen, you figure it out, but it is a stress.
yeah.
So I remember, yeah, there's relief in that being gone.
Yes, and my experience of working in schools is that schools are pretty inflexible places in lots of ways because of the nature of the work that we do. As teachers, it's the lessons happen regardless of whether we're there or not. And I've always found that myself, that if I'm ever sick, and the thought of taking a sick day as a teacher in itself is really difficult, because you have to kind of get up and phone in and then plan the lesson still, but in a way that a non-specialist can teach it, which all of that, it kind of makes me think seriously about whether I'm sick enough to not go in or not.
Yes,
So yeah,
100%. I remember those moments of thinking, gosh, it's more work to be out.
it is.
It's it done to just go in and just get through it. Yes. And those moments of, you try to explain it to someone else, but you have 20 something children in front of you. I cannot just walk out the
No,
door,
no,
even
no.
if it's my own child, and I those were difficult moments for
Yeah,
sure. I would feel very torn. So that is a plus. And I know people figure it out every day.
yeah, of
So
course.
not, making it sound like it's the worst thing ever, but that has been a benefit for sure,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
just a little bit more flexible with my time, and I can shape my schedule as I need to. And I think the biggest benefit is also just that feeling that I feel like I'm where I need to be right now.
yeah,
And I am honoring those, I call them whispers,
yeah,
just if there's something that you've been thinking about or want to go after, that I'm listening to them and I'm honoring them. And I don't know where the path is going to lead.
No.
But right now, I've mentioned it in my writing, but I'm working on my first novel, which I think if someone had told me that I'd be doing that, what is it, 4 years ago now when I'd started, I never would have believed it. But it's just that feeling of, yes, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm just going to kind of trust the process.
Yeah, that's great. Is there anything about teaching that you miss?
I miss it all the time. This is something I just wrote about. I think that we can be lots of things in our lives, and it doesn't have to be one or the other only at one time. There was a moment after the pandemic. I remember this when I brought my kids back to school and I dropped my son off and I watched him walk, onto the campus, and I saw the door of the school office swing open or, close behind someone. And I thought, gosh, is that never going to be part of my life again?
Yeah.
Am I only going to be a parent in this context now? And I did have a moment when I just thought, gosh, I felt sad. And part of that may have been too, just because I had reinvested in myself and I felt very sure that this was something I was going to go back to. And, I would sort of get back on track with my career.
Yeah.
So I will always champion teachers and support anyone who's invested in their learning. It's, they do amazing work, and I think it will always be part of me.
Yes.
And at the same time, the way that I feel with my writing now and what it's brought to my life right now, it also makes me realize that not only is it where I'm supposed to be right now, which I've said, but perhaps when we make these transitions, it's not a matter of, I don't want to be there anymore. It's not a sharp departure, but maybe it's just maybe I just grew out of that job at that point in my life. And I really, I never like to say never, but I don't know what is going to happen, but I know that I want to be writing my first novel right now. So I'm doing that.
Yeah. So that's the strongest pull for you. So you're
100%.
going in with that feeling, which I think is really
100%.
important.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps that leads quite nicely onto my next question, which was to talk to us maybe about any transferable skills. I'm sure there are lots from teaching, but into writing, and things that you feel have benefited you where you are now, having been a teacher.
Yeah, I'd say the biggest one is organization. I think that you have to just be, and this, just beyond organized, and then a little more to make sure, your day runs smoothly in the classroom. So that is, and I will also add to that I've been home with 3 children for a decade. So, managing all of their schedules, and the full household also requires a lot of organization. So I think that's probably the biggest transferable skill.
Yeah.
I think that teachers also, yes, they're very organized people, but I always sort of thought the profession attracted a certain type, like highly organized, but also with a creative streak. Because I think so much of teaching does require creative thinking, not only just how you're going to design your classroom and what kinds of, management scenarios are you going to use, what works to your personality, but also curriculum design and tweaking lessons. And, you may have a lesson that you teach every year, but it's going to look different with every group of students.
Absolutely.
And I think that once you have your organization and all your systems in place, that creates a lot of space for that creative thinking. And I do think that that, like all of both of those pieces transfer into writing, not just writing a a piece, an essay or a story, but also the life around it.
Yes.
Organizing time and all the things that need to get done.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's so many links between them, and
Mhm.
I think I was talking to someone earlier about this, that I think everything we do in our lives is feeding into the next thing that we do in our lives. There's always a transferable thread or a transferable skill that kind of
Yeah, through
links
lines,
through.
I think.
Always, yeah. Um,
I agree.
and were your friends and family supportive of your switch to becoming a writer, and how did they feel about it and react to it?
Yeah, I love this question. Um, I think on the whole that, yes, I think people close to me have been very supportive. And I think anytime you see someone getting joy out of something, it's really easy to be happy for them. I do think because of the timing of when this all came about in my life, that, everyone was locked down for so long. And then all of a sudden we all came back together, and it was, oh, all of a sudden you've become a writer, after all this time. So I think that maybe that surprised some people, and it is, I don't blame them at all. Oh, wait, you're not going back to your job. You're going to write a book now. um, Maybe a moment of just, slight confusion. Maybe, I don't know, just kind of surprise, maybe.
Yeah.
But, and I think that's fair. I think anytime anyone says, oh, I'm going to leave a paying job and I'm just going to mix it up and just do this thing that I've never mentioned to you. And
Yes, yeah.
right. And that you didn't see coming, it's okay, give them that moment. But I think on the whole, once I got my head around it and that sort of came across in the way I presented it to people, like I said, the point before I said about giving myself permission, I think the way you present it comes across when you tell people. And I think most of the time, I'd say all the time, people are lovely and very supportive and very encouraging. And a lot of people, when I say, oh, I'm gonna go ahead and try to write I will finish it. I don't know what's going to happen with it, but I'm writing my first novel. A lot of people are just not only maybe just, encouraging, but really inspired by it.
Yeah.
So it's been good.
I think when people see others taking what they might perceive as a risk, in
Yes.
doing something that's not the thing that everybody does,
Right.
I think it does inspire other people, because they think, oh, maybe I could do something like that. Not necessarily
Yeah.
write a novel, but maybe they have an equivalent, dream or idea in their own minds.
That's exactly it. Whatever it is for you, everyone has something different. And I do think that when like you said, when you see someone taking that risk, it does open up just the idea that it might be possible.
Yeah.
In some form.
Yeah. And I think, do you find that also then spurs you on a little further into what you're doing, because you feel like you're spreading that inspiration and that joy around a little?
Yeah, it does feel good to see that little light, in someone's eye when they go, oh gosh, you're doing that. Yeah, that does feel good.
Yeah,
And
that's
it
great.
does, like you said, it does help me keep moving.
And how has your career change enabled you to be more creative in your life in general, do you think?
I think that I am definitely more attuned to the things that, just the daily inspiration and where my ideas are coming from. And I think when I first realized I wanted to write, these ideas they were sort of popping up throughout my day, but I didn't really know what to do with them. For example, I'd hear a snippet of a conversation in the line at the grocery store, or I'd see an expression cross someone's face that I think that the person they were talking to didn't really pick up on, just teeny tiny little observations that for me would spark a whole story in my head. And once I started paying attention to that, and the idea that my mind was working in this creative way, I just started to be more open to it. And so now I just understand that that's how it works. And that's where my work comes from. I have to pay attention to it. So I do try to create space to get, just to allow those, those wheels to turn.
Yeah.
So, and I honor it when those ideas come. I keep, a pad of paper and a pen in my bag. I just went for a run the other day, and that's honestly when I get a lot of my best ideas.
Yeah.
And I had a snippet of dialogue come in for one of my characters, and I stopped on the sidewalk in the middle of my run. I got my phone out, and, I made a voice memo
Yeah.
like right there, because I thought, oh, I have it right now. It's
Yeah.
clear. So I think I understand what's happening in my mind better, but I also think that I have a better sense of how other people who are engaged in creative pursuits, what just the time and the energy
Yeah.
that is, and the drive that is going into their work.
Yeah.
So people who are, like artist friends or musicians, I just have a better sense perhaps of what is going into their work. So that's
Yeah.
kind of cool.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, I feel similar to you that it's it's that idea of allowing yourself the time to let these ideas in. But I was thinking this morning, I found myself on a bus. I sort of walked halfway somewhere and I was meeting somebody, and then I jumped on a bus, which ended up being incredibly busy. I sort of regretted it as soon as I'd got in there. But it was then really interesting because I was sitting on this bus and I was looking around me, and there were all sorts of people in this small space. And I was just really observing what was going on inadvertently. I wasn't, didn't plan to do
Yes.
that, but it just happened. And I sat there thinking, I think I'm more, like you say, more attuned to what's going on around me. And it's like my eyes have been opened over the past year or so because I've allowed it to happen. And I can't quite describe it, why it's happened or how it's happened, but I've just become much more aware of surroundings and
Yes.
people and interactions. And yeah.
Yeah. But the flip side of that, and I like the way you put it. I think you wrote about this a while back, but I think you described it as an ideas volcano.
Yes.
So there's that piece of it too, because sometimes like, oh my gosh,
Too
there's
much.
yeah, too much. I've got, and it's not just ideas about not just story ideas, but this is, I want to write about this next. And
Yeah.
then I need to, I don't know, create this community and just all sorts of ideas about all the things I want to do. And sometimes my mind is just so far ahead of how fast everything
Yeah.
is happening
Yeah.
that I just have to keep writing it down, keeping a lot of,
Yes.
I feel like,
Yeah, it can
yeah.
be quite overwhelming sometimes, can't it? That feeling. But maybe our organizational skills as teachers can come in there and try and
I
sort these
think
things
so.
out. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, lists, so many lists. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, and I agree. And I'm constantly jotting down notes and writing things down. And I think some of those things probably will never go anywhere, but some of those seeds of ideas do turn into things that and end up writing about, which
Yes. And I think that
fascinating.
for me, yes, it's like you said, most of them won't go anywhere,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
I will adjust them or tweak them, or they'll evolve in some way.
yeah,
But I need to get them down so that it's almost like they can marinate a little bit
yeah,
and
yeah. I
take
love that
shape.
idea.
Yeah. However and whenever they need to.
Yeah, no, it's really important, I think. And when I read about other writers sort of practices, that's often something that seems to come up as well. In fact, I read a post, I don't know if you saw it, but Emma Gannon had posted something today about kind of tips for writing, or I think it was specifically
Yes,
for
I
writing on
saw it.
Substack, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But she said something about you can keep have all these ideas, and some of them will work, some of them won't. And she said that she also didn't plan things very far ahead. She just
She
went
doesn't
with
have
what
an
felt right.
editorial calendar. Yes,
Yeah,
I knew that. And when I first read it, I thought, oh, that feels a little scary, even though I don't do that because I just am not there yet.
yeah,
But I realized after I read it, I thought, well, that's exactly how I work too.
yeah,
I really don't know what I'm going to write
yeah,
about next? Because, and then when I do, it feels like exactly what I need to be writing for that post.
Yeah, I found that quite reassuring to read that, because I thought,
Yes, me
oh,
too.
okay, I'm
If she's
great,
doing
you know.
it, yeah.
Yeah, yes. So that was quite reassuring, I think, for lots of people.
Uh-huh.
So my final question to you is,
Mhm.
what would be your top piece of advice to somebody who might be listening and who is considering making some kind of career change or a big life change of some kind?
Yeah. I I would say, first of all, listen to those whispers. If something is in your mind that, if you've been thinking about something for a while and it just keeps circling back, I don't think I don't think those ideas will leave you alone until you pay attention to them in some way. And it certainly doesn't mean, oh, go quit your job and
Sure.
just,
Yeah. Yeah.
it doesn't mean, I don't think it has to be one or the other right away. I think that there are so many ways that you can just sort of dip your toe in and test the waters, take a class. That's my way of doing it. But, or find someone who's already doing it. Talk to people, just find a way that you can sort of try it on or get a better sense of what it might look like for you. So that would be my first biggest piece of advice. Just listen, because I think that, I always say trust your gut, but I just think
Yeah.
those voices mean something. They're there for a reason. And then the other one is, don't you don't have to go it alone. Find a community of some sort. And also with that, a community of people doing that thing, whatever it is that you want to do, but also find people who can mentor you or guide you in some way, whether that is through a class or an instructor or just people who have gone before.
Yeah.
I think are just incredible resources. And also, if this thing you're trying to do or this transition you're trying to make is new for you, it's not like you've been doing it forever and all of a sudden you've decided to make it your main gig. But if you are new to it, like I was to writing, and you really do need to learn the craft of it, then I think surrounding yourself with people who have gone before can really help flatten your learning curve. Because I think when the learning curve is so steep and you're trying to do it alone, it can become discouraging, right? So just for matters of efficiency,
Yeah.
ask for help. There's so many resources out there. And I think something else I would say would be that transitions can take time.
Yeah.
And so just trust that those teeny tiny steps are adding up. They really do. And it's actually not such a bad thing to take your time and let the process just evolve, because I think sometimes it ends up better that way.
Yeah.
You just take some time finding your way. And then my last piece, and I said this before, would be just to remember what we tell our kids all the time, is that you can do anything you want to do, right? And I think we mean that when we tell them that. So I think it's the same. It's not like you can't choose again when you're older, and you can keep choosing. And
Yes.
I think that we can be a lot of things. We can do a lot of things. There might be overlap. There may not be, or it just might not be clear, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead and give it a shot. And I think that when we are open, we will amaze ourselves, and when we see what we're capable of.
Yeah. I think that's a lovely phrase. I like that. When we're open, we see what we're capable of. Maria, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you today. Thank you so much for sharing your
Oh my
story.
gosh, I've loved chatting with you too, Hannah. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
That was Hannah Ash talking to Maria Hanley on the Shea Hanny podcast, Inspiring Creative Career Change. If you enjoyed that, then you might want to check out the previous episodes, which you can find by visiting shayhanny.substack.com. I hope you'll join me again here in 2 weeks' time for the next episode. See you then.